some of the stats in big fires in California. A total area of 250,000 acres was burned out. In Australia, in the last 2 months, nearly 10 million
Yeah, that's right.
acres have
That's what
burned
I
out.
said. It's worse than the fire that Rosie went on about. When was it?
It's nothing like it.
Last year?
We've never seen this before.
No. Last year before, whatever.
Most of the places that have been destroyed we've been to or lived in, and we know what's there and what is no longer there.
Yeah, exactly.
Every day people are getting killed. They've just said 17 people are missing from a town.
That's not good. It's a lot of people.
Those people on the beach were lucky the army came in and took most of them off.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, is Link affected?
There are fires through there.
Has he posted lately or said
No.
anything?
Yeah, fires there in August, if you remember. Big fire trucks there. We've gotten away with it here at the moment.
Usually the hills cop it.
We haven't even started our summer.
Huh?
Australia's not into its deep summer yet.
No. That's why we degrade.
Hello, VMAC. Another bad day in Australia with fires. VMAC, terrible. Yes, actually we were just talking about that, a place called Malakuta, where about 4,000 ended up on the beach. And the Army and Navy combined, first of all, got a heap of water, food and medics in, because people were burnt. But then they sent in transport and took most of them off the beach, because a lot of them were in the water. But that was just one incident. Whole towns have just disappeared. 17 people are missing from one town. It's hard to explain to people how big our country is. It's huge. And to put some sort of perspective on it, California had absolutely devastating fires in the recent history, a year and a half ago. And fires that burnt through California at the time burned 250,000 acres. We're well over 10 million acres at the moment. I mean, it's just staggering for Australians to understand. We know what bushfires are like, and it's everywhere. One of the reports that came from New Zealand today, which is a long way away from Australia, it's probably 2,000 kilometres. The southern glaciers of New Zealand are now coloured pink because of the ash. Oh, we've got Canadian military and firefighters. The military has come here to assist with distribution with our Australian Army. So they're not just firefighters that have come from Canada. Same in New Zealand. We've got a massive contingent of New Zealand people here. And some from the US. And I'm sure when they go back to their own countries, they'll tell their own stories. Do you remember the movie, and I put the title in as The Road? The Road had the actor Viggo Mortensen, who played the main lead actor as the King in Return of the King. Well, he starred in that movie with a little kid, but it reminds me of the scenery in that movie where there was just everything burnt, total devastation, and that's what major parts of Australia look like. So if you remember that movie, that's what people are facing. I suppose if it was a town or a district that was suffering, it'd be different. But all over Australia, this is being replicated. We've been very fortunate here. We've got a massive range just east of us that is thick bush, and there's been 2 or 3 fires that have luckily been put out. But we're not even into our real summer yet. Our heat doesn't start till late January and February. But everywhere's the same. In South Australia, towns have been destroyed. Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland. We're talking, like I say, massive area. If you Google satellite images of Australian bushfires, you'll be staggered. I mean, we had enough land, houses and towns destroyed, which equaled, this week, just this week alone, from Christmas until now, the size of Belgium and Haiti put together, which is, then you get a perspective that it's not just an event, it's a major event here. And we're real thankful that people are coming to help, but even they have already made statements here how staggered they are. Like, there are fires that just can't be fought. They have walked away from towns, and just recently a beautiful little place called Lithgow, which is up over the mountains of the Blue Mountains. The whole town was evacuated yesterday. That's 10,000 people. They weren't asked to leave, they were forced to leave. The army went in. And touching your heartstrings, there's a terrible outcome already because these bushfires have been so wide and far spread. There's a crisis on for animals, and there are people right now volunteering, going alongside creeks, not near the road, but near the creeks, even though they're dry, and they're dropping off food for all the wildlife. It's a big effort because it's not just the fact that a lot of them have been killed and displaced, obviously, from where they live, but there's nothing for them to eat. The ground is raised. You go alongside these places that have been burnt out, you just pick up sand. So there's all sorts of foliage being delivered for animals like koalas. There's food being delivered for kangaroos, because we have not even got any idea in reality about how many of the animals have been killed. It would be millions and millions. Humans at least can get away. Animals tend to grow up and live in a fairly set, defined area. So a lot of them, unfortunately, just hunker behind a tree and don't make it. But it's everywhere. I'm only 60, but I've known some. In my state here alone, we've had horrific fires over the decades. But they're always a district fire, or they're an area of, say, just 1 million acres, and then people are well bought and they get out. But some of these fires, one of the photos I saw that was taken from the space station, when a volcano explodes, you see that pyrotechnic cloud form through the atmosphere. Well, this showed the east coast of Australia looked like a massive volcano had gone off, because it had gone all the way through, and that's what was dumped on New Zealand into the glaciers. That's why their white, pristine glaciers are now pink. And they will stay pink for a long time. I mean, it's just the number of people displaced. I mean, there's been a terrible loss of life, but when you've got a town of like 2,000 or 3,000 people and their town is no longer there, they are really displaced. They've lost everything, and then you've got to try and set up some sort of emergency shelter, or get them. We do a lot of this in Australia. We'd do it right now.
That's why
we would put up a family if they needed it. So Australians do that all the time because of bushfires.
And the funny smell we had today, I said to you, what is that smell?
Yeah, I said the same.
That recycling plant just down the road.
Still burning?
No, a different fire.
Jeez.
Fire again.
And we lost a house close to us recently. Yeah, no, they're saying, they're actually talking about setting up refuge for animals in areas where they can actually take animals, even though it's not their area, and keep them for 2 years, and then reallocate them back, hopefully, to their normal habitat, which should have recovered by then. The bush recovers reasonably quickly, but it's only little sprigs on trees that regrow, a bit of ground cover comes up. There's all the life of the area takes years to replicate. So you'll read about it in the future. There'll be huge efforts in trying to save as many animals as they can, because they're part of the environment. It doesn't work when you take a species out, it puts an imbalance. So one of the biologists says it will take 50 years in some areas for it to be back to where it is. And it's the only time in my lifetime that as you head north on my coast and up the east coast where we have rainforests. They've never burnt before. They've never been bushfires in rainforests. A, because it's usually too wet. Or bushfires are burning in rainforests, which is a fair indication that not only is it drought conditions, but it's very unusual. But like someone said on the radio today, is this the new norm? This is what will happen all the time? It means some areas won't be rebuilt in Australia, particularly in southern New South Wales and northern Victoria, because they'll be just too dangerous to live in. And it'll come about in a very innocuous way. It'll be insurance companies saying, if you are going to build in that area, we won't insure you. The risk's too high. It just makes me so sad that It's an obvious change in our conditions in this country. We're used to bushfires, but it's never been
It's
all
bad.
over Australia. It's everywhere. You know, there are relief funds going and people in Australia dig deep and help, and that's great. We don't need anyone from any other country to help us. It's not that we're too proud. We get by. We'll get through it. But this is the new norm, start of a new decade. I hold very little hope for the next 10 years for the environment around the whole planet. You can be rest assured what we've had is extraordinary here is not going to be isolated. It won't just be Australia that's facing these sort of temperatures and drought and fires and all the terrible things that come with it. It'll be in the Northern Hemisphere come your summer. There'll be noticeable things happen that I will be listening to you, VMAC, saying this is extraordinary. And I don't wish it upon anyone. But it's not just Australia. We're just facing if you like, we're facing the fire at the moment, in a literal sense. But when our axis tilts as a planet, I don't see it changing for the Northern Hemisphere. I think there will get an increase in lots of problems.
Well, I don't know how the fire started today in the recycle plant because they've actually shut the whole plant down. Everybody was laid off a month ago.
Maybe it's someone just being vindictive. But Australia is an irony of weather and conditions because in 3 days' time, some of these areas that have been totally wiped out have flood warnings. That's the sort of country it is here. It's too late for most of these places, but what will happen is that all these areas that have been decimated will be flooded. It's the last thing they need. It sounds irony, but you don't need rain when everything's been destroyed. It may quell a few of the bigger fires.
Yeah, we just keep praying and praying for just rain to alleviate, not to cause flood, and to help with the drought.
I mean, some of these places that are burnt, farmers have been struggling for a decade anyway. They're just walking off. There's nothing left. It's just gone. Our Prime Minister got a kick in the arse today. This is what happened, and it will be international news, I assure you. There was a town that was wiped out, and he flew in, and he got in a limousine and drove to the town, and there was a lady standing there just with a forlorn look on her face. He stuck his hand out to shake it, and she didn't respond, so he grabbed her right arm, put her hand in his.
To shake it.
And the whole town told him to fuck off. Don't come here for a photo shoot. Get in your car and fuck off. Trust me, that'll be on international news. He is the biggest climate denier ever. I'm not a big climate change vocalist, but things are changing. We don't need to argue about it. We just need to do something about it. And he is one of the major, no, climate change is all bullshit, it's all crap, let's keep getting coal, and he's in for a rude shock. That one photo session that he thought would be, the Prime Minister's gone down there, what a good bloke, has turned into everyone telling him to fuck off.
And he was very quick on his heels to get in the car.
Oh, he disappeared.
Maybe VMAC can look it up. What channel was it?
Oh, look, it'll be on the international news.
I don't know if it'll be as detailed as what we saw though.
Yeah. Doing nothing is his policy.
VMAC's on the ball though. VMAC's been looking up information.
And not even discussion the economic impacts on our country. That is devastating. Just the human one. That's the main thing at the moment. The economic one is going to follow. Yeah. I mean, all he did, our Australian Prime Minister just went down for a photo shoot. You know, Australian Prime Minister comforts the townspeople who have
Yeah,
lost
but-
everything. No, they told them to fuck off.
Well, what started the hate against him is in the middle of all these fires, and when it was getting worse, what did he do?
Oh, he went on holiday to Hawaii.
He went on holidays to Hawaii.
Yeah, country's burning. I'm just going on holiday for a couple of weeks, all right? Really?
That's what did it for the Australian people. You're Prime Minister, you've got a job to do.
The irony about the environmental minister is that he is being charged by the federal police for cooking the books. So that'll make international news as well. The so-called protector of our environment, the Minister for Environments, is probably going to get arrested. Yeah, we get to hear a lot about Canada too. It just saddens me that it's so catastrophic. It's not like look in 2011 or 2009 I think, we lost 173 people in one town in Victoria. It's called Black Friday or Black Saturday I think.
Yeah, I get a bit
And that's
confused.
happened on occasions over the decades, that you just can't warn enough people quickly. And unfortunately, 173 people died. But that was an isolated area. And there was another one in South Australia, I think 100 people died, and that
Yeah,
about
then
2 or
you've
3
got-
years later.
Yeah, I've forgotten. Then you've got Ash Wednesday.
Yeah. I mean, on top of all this, across Australia, we just keep setting new temperature records. On tomorrow, we have fire levels, and you would see them in your country, where it's low risk, high risk, very dangerous, extreme. Well, we've added another one. In the last 2 years, we've added another category, which is just catastrophic, which means your town will burn. And tomorrow, in about 80 towns on the east coast, are under catastrophic fire warnings. Why? Well, the temperature's going to reach 46, 47 degrees, the winds are blowing, and the fires are already there. So tomorrow could be another horrendous day. One of the firefighters made a real poignant statement saying that he is part of the SES. He works for the fire brigade as a volunteer during the fire season, but he also works as an SES. He said, there's one thing you can do in a flood. You will lose people in a flood. He said, but you can get away from a flood.
Yes.
He said, what we can't do here is because in 10 minutes,
It's
where the fire was is elsewhere.
yeah.
In fact, we have the bushfires here, they create their own weather. And a bushfire could be raging on a massive front. And 30 miles away, it's called dry lightning. It's formed in the clouds. And 30 miles away, another lightning strike will start another fire, not a cloud in the sky. And our ember from fires, because the winds are so strong, they've got people saying that they were in a town 30 miles away, and they drove to the fire and were helping putting that out. And then when they drove back to their town where they came from, it's disappeared because the fire embers had crossed into the sky, started a fire. So they put out one fire, saved one town, but the town they left was destroyed. But there was no hint of fire when they left. And I know it doesn't make news on YouTube, and no one wants to listen to an old bloke talk about fires that are devastating in the country that no one knows anything about.
Well, some people do. Some
But-
people do know, and some people do follow, and we know they feel for us. But it's
But we've got another 3 to 4 months of summer.
just sometimes we feel useless. The only way it's still good helping, donating clothes, food, blah blah blah.
Oh, we've even.
But it's like it makes you want to go out there and help fight the fires, go save the animals, the people.
But they've even, when Queensland had massive fires and floods within the same week, there was something like 3,000 families displaced. They flew most of them to New South Wales and Victoria, where people said, we'll take one family.
Yeah, exactly.
Airline companies put up free airfares there and back, and people stayed as long as they needed to. I don't know any Australian who would say no. Yeah, YouTube is about chronic illnesses, people that can't leave their home, sit behind a computer, and e-begging.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the real, true essence of life, is worrying about people like that. Not. There's something that happened yesterday which pissed me off, because I always say, if you look like your house is under threat, just get out.
Yes.
Just leave.
Leave, that's
Well,
right.
a father and son stayed behind, the rest of the family went away, and the father and son are now dead. It's not worth it. It's not
No.
worth trying to protect something, particularly most people are insured. So why would you stay?
But some people just don't think logically in situations like that.
Well, one firefighter said, he said, this is what happens with people with their homes. He said, it's like if you were walking down the street and you went a quarter across the road and your wallet fell in the middle of the street. Most people wouldn't wait for the traffic.
No,
They want to go back and get their wallet. He says, that explains people
Yeah.
who don't want to lose their house.
Oh, yeah.
It's just not worth it. Even if your life and your quality of life is diminished because you've lost everything, you're still alive.
And like where Max said before, it might take a while, but you can rebuild.
Mm-hmm. There's a sad story, a big farm in New South Wales who has had 5 fires in 5 years. He said, I'm bankrupt, I'm done. And yet the story behind his farm goes back 6 generations. And it's real sad. Yeah, no one does that here. No one complains. Like people, there was a lady who actually was asked to help with locating pits for fire hoses, and she did it. And all along, she knew her house was burning. She never said a damn thing. She even made them sandwiches and cups of tea. And the guy said, oh, we probably could have gone down that street. And she says, no, I can rebuild. Yes, I've lost everything. But we saved 3 or 4 houses today. 3 or 4 other people won't have to go through what she went through. So it's an amazing response when you see a whole town stand up and say, all right, let's get the shovels and don on some protective gear and go and help. Because in Australia, you don't see firemen fighting bushfires. It's a volunteer fire force, well trained. Usually they raise their own money to buy the trucks and the equipment they need, and they have plans like there's allocated dams where they can top up water for helicopters and things like that. It's well organised. It's not really an Australian thing to do. It's like if a firefighter's up your street and you've lost your house but he saved another one, they're not going to say, why didn't you save mine? They understand the fire is not predictable. We watched one video about 3 weeks ago where fire was raging through the suburbs just outside Sydney, and there was 4 or 5 houses just blowing up. And in the middle was a house that got singed, and on the other side of that house, another dozen houses blew up. Somehow the fire in a channel of air, whatever it was, that house is still standing, but the rest are all gone. I mean, I just hope it doesn't happen in the Northern Hemisphere like they're predicting. for this coming summer. Europe is not prepared for those type of temperatures. There's no chance for them. Lots of historical buildings apparently are gone as well.
Yeah, that's also a shame, but
Anyway, I've done a bit of venting. It might be enough for the night. Just saddened by what's happening. To grab more coffee. Actually, we just had a coffee, it was nice. Yeah, I truly hope that it doesn't happen this year in the Northern Hemisphere. That our temperatures have just been off the scale. I don't see why it wouldn't happen in the Northern Hemisphere. Can you imagine temperatures in Europe of 40, 44, 45 degrees Celsius? None of these places have air conditioners. Most of Europe just has a window open if it gets a bit warm. There'll be the videos coming out of the rail tracks that have melted so much that they're twisted like sculptures. Because when a bushfire that big, or bushfires that we're having are that big, everything stops, nothing moves. Yeah, have a good day there, Matt. I think we might call it a night ourselves. But to anyone that's listening, I'm not whinging, I'm not moaning, I'm just saddened by what's happening in my country. It's burning to the ground everywhere. And many millions of people are being affected. But we'll get through it. As we say in Australia, she'll be right. See you later.